everyone. This is a beautiful, cold, snowy day in the northeast. We just had a bit of a snowstorm. They were saying feet, but we got about 6 inches, which is very exciting. It's also the time of year where lots of us have colds and flus, and there's been lots of coughs going around. So one of our best cough remedies that we have here is white pine. This is a white pine that we planted, but it is native here. And we're in the foothills of the Adirondacks. It was very common all over the Adirondacks. It's been logged mostly, but there's still some old growth stands around. And let's see. The way you can identify it is that a white pine has 5 needles in a little packet. They're like these little packets. It's like a little piece that wraps around some of the older ones that kind of holds them together. And the time of year to make tincture is generally not now. Generally it's when the new growth starts in the spring, so you'll get this new green growth. But for coughs, during cough season, this time of year is fine to take the needles and even some of the twigs and make tea. So that's what I'm going to do today. So white pine is antiseptic, and it's also what we call a mucolytic expectorant, which is a big word for it actually draws out old mucus and helps to remove it from the lungs and the respiratory system so that new, clean, immune supportive mucus can move in. I use it the same way that I use elecampane root. It's got similar properties. It's warming, also very high in vitamin C, and the Native Americans here used it. Also great for drying the resin, which you can't see from here, but this tree was a huge branch was broken off during a storm, and whenever a branch is broken off on a pine tree or any of the evergreen trees, they produce a resin. It's sort of like a scab that comes over where it was injured, and that was used for drying and also wound healing, and also can be used as like a band-aid, almost like stitches. It kind of holds the skin together. It's very sticky. Vitamin C, which is something the settlers didn't know at first, and a lot of them came here and died of scurvy, and which is kind of ironic since these trees were towering over them the entire time. So I gather these just by taking some of the lower branches. We're not going to get too much, and we're going to go inside and I'm going to show you how to make a syrup. Okay, we're inside now where it's much warmer, and we're about to make some white pine syrup. And I'm going to explain the steps to you, and then I'm going to demonstrate them. So there's different ways to make syrups. This is just the way that I've been doing it. And sometimes I do it differently depending on the plant. This is the way I do white pine. The general measurement for syrups is 2 ounces of plant material to a quart of water, but that also varies depending on the plant. 2 ounces, if we weigh 2 ounces of white pine, would be a lot more white pine needles than you'd actually need. So I measure this by the cup, and I do about a half a cup to a cup of pine needles, depending on how strong you want your syrup to taste. Let's see, I want to show you, because we're inside now, I think we can see this maybe a little bit better. That was broken off. Here we go. Maybe we can zoom in on the 5. This is how we identify it. There's 5 needles in like a little packet. And they're about 4 inches long. And the indications for white pine use are green mucus. So if we see somebody has an infection where there's green mucus, sometimes yellowish green mucus, very stuck, stagnant, then it's an indication for white pine. Okay. So I'm going to strip the needles. White pine is also sacred tree to the Haudenosaunee, or otherwise known as the Iroquois. And they called it the Tree of Peace, or the Great Tree of Peace. And I understand why, and if you've ever been in a white pine forest, you probably know too. It just has a very calming, peaceful, very grounding feel to it. And the smell is also very peace-inducing. Let's see. Again, I make the tincture in the spring, but this time of year, it's instant medicine. You can go outside in our backyards or in the nearby woods and gather it. And a tea can also be made if you don't want to take the time to make a syrup. I do make the syrups and store it in the refrigerator. If you want to make a tea, it is best if you steep it for at least a half an hour to an hour. Well, otherwise, it just won't be strong enough. You also use it as a steam. You could put some needles in some hot water and just breathe in the aroma. All right, so that's about how much I'm going to use. And this is going to go into my pot where I have a quart of water waiting. Okay, so we've got our pine needles in the pot, and we're going to simmer this for about a half an hour. After we're done simmering, we'll strain it, strain out the needles, and then pour the liquid back into the pan, and then we'll cook it down halfway. Okay, it's time to strain. So we're already getting a nice color. So I'm going to strain that and rinse out what's left in the pan. Okay. And then I'm going to pour the liquid back in. Now this goes back on the stove. So the way that I check it is I use a spoon and I just measure where the liquid is on the spoon so it comes to right there. And so I want to cook it down to halfway, so I want it down to about there. So here we have it. It's about cooked down halfway, and the color is much darker now. It's definitely concentrated. And now you can add some kind of sweetener. So people like to use maple syrup or honey. You could even add a little molasses. If you wanted, I have not tried this, but I suppose you could probably add agave. You could add vegetable glycerin. So I have some raw honey, and I do this especially with the honey at the end because I don't want to heat my honey for too long because that kills the enzymes. So I'm going to add this to taste. I'm going to dissolve that in, and then I'll taste it a few times and see if it's enough or if I need more. So when the honey is warmed through, you don't want to use a cold jar, this will crack. You want to make sure your jar and break. You want to make sure your jar is warm enough, and voila. And you can either drink this by the spoonful, Or what I like to do is mix it in with other teas if somebody's sick, like maybe some mullein and some thyme, make some tea, add a spoonful or two of the pine syrup to it. Enjoy!